My name is Betsey Potter, and I am a costumer in the Hollywood industry and worked as a designer in television. And I sew, I bead, I make things, I make patterns. There's almost nothing I don't do. My background is that I really loved history. I liked both the social and economic events of history, not just what happened and who fought whom. I wanted to be a costume curator, but there were no costume curators except at the Smithsonian and I think the Field Museum in Chicago. I was doing theater in New York, and I met a couple of Broadway stars, and those Broadway stars ended up being TV stars, and that's how I got offered a job out here in Hollywood. In terms of running the wardrobe department, when I first started, we had to create a space to put this wardrobe, and it sort of fell to me to take care of it. And then eventually, when I wasn't doing a show, I would stay there and organize it and became the head of the wardrobe. If you historically know Norman shows, they sort of evolve one from another, so that Maude is related to the Jeffersons. They tend to be interrelated. But we shared clothes on the shows. That's one of the most amazing and unusual and sort of, well, it's done today, but it's different. So lots of times we would see something and we would need something and see it on another show. And because we were all working for the same company, you could ask to borrow something. So I remember turning on the TV one time and seeing an outfit I had put on Mackenzie Phillips on 2 other television shows. So to borrow clothes from another show to put on a different person, worn a different way, actually made life easier because you had accessibility to clothes. So it was really an asset and a help to have other clothes from other shows that you could use. And I can remember borrowing things for silver spoons, I think, from Married with Children. Well, it's interesting that one would identify Norman's shows as politically incorrect, because I would just say they were political. They were incorrect characters, but that was how you could access those controversies and have those discussions. They weren't always really funny, these shows. They were serious. The Jeffersons was interracial. It was someone moving up economically in the world and having more power than they had had. Good Times was also an interracial show, but in a different way. Different Strokes was like that. Married with Children was politically incorrect for sure. It reflected that whole lifestyle that had evolved that wasn't the same when 12 years ago I had started working with Norman shows, and all the shows were a little bit nicer. What I loved about them was that they were a social statement. They were making people aware of their behavior and possibly opening a conversation and making change. So now we're doing costumes for something where we're making people aware of how people behave badly. And in picking the clothes, we are giving subtle direction as to what you should think about this person. And that's the thing about costumes. Costumes are clothes. They are just clothes that you can buy in the store, but which item you pick and how you put it on someone and how they wear it and how it fits them all speaks to who that person is. And the minute you see them, you know something about them. There's a little secret told to you about who that person is, and that's why costumes are important. Esther Rolle was a role model for an enormous number of people. I have listened to people talk about it, and it was the first time they saw a black family really be a family on TV. So what Esther wore was really important to those people. We were much more real also then about the clothes. I remember having to fight a little bit about this and saying they shouldn't have new clothes all the time. Now, I didn't do Good Times, don't misunderstand, but say on One Day at a Time, they should repeat their clothes because they only had so much money, and that's what real people out in America have to deal with. Now, when I got to Silver Spoons was not real. You had a wealthy man who was playing with toys and doing toys, and he could be casual. You had a kid who's been adopted. Same with Different Strokes. You have these kids coming into this wealthy family. Their clothes, however, still reflected the fact that they could afford more. So suddenly you began to have more clothes on everybody. Red Fox's clothes, and the whole show was designed by Rita Riggs, and she clearly made a point of having him wear things that he had for a long time. He's a rag picker, And so he's not going to have a lot of money. He's not going to get rid of things. I think he had like maybe 3 sweaters, 2 pairs of pants, a suit, 2 suits, a couple of ties. That was it. And we came right into his living room and we saw those clothes also hung on the set. The costumes on Married with Children, again, reflected the times. So Christina Applegate wore this great neo-California look. It was a cotton lycra dress and it was in the colors of the time, one of the color combinations, which was pink and orange. And it was just a really contemporary dress that spoke to her outrageous character and her great body, and the fact that everybody was tuning in to see what Kelly was wearing. That was important. Al dressed up in his Godfather suit, and the fact that we refer to it as the Godfather suit is a reflection of how strong our imagery comes from these movies, from The Godfather, and we all know what a Godfather suit looks like. We know exactly what it looks like, and Al knew what a Godfather suit would look like, and he, it's just so interesting to see that whole evolution of imagery and where costumes become important. When I say that a costume has value, and it gains value, is actually as time goes on. What am I talking about? I'm talking about what those actors and what those characters meant to people who were watching. It's really interesting to talk to people elsewhere, not in Hollywood, but elsewhere in the country, and hear them talk about those TV shows, which were just what you worked on and what was happening on the other stage at the lot. We've begun finally to see clothes have costumes or iconic outfits have importance that we didn't understand for years, because they bring up moments in history to us. That's part of it. They bring up to each person a different meaning. It was really part of our lives, and it was just the same all across America. We had so much less TV that all of America saw the same things. All of America had the same issues. We now have so many different shows that you really can't watch them all. You wouldn't ever leave your house. Yeah, I kept all those clothes for about 35 years. I've moved those with me over and over, and I have used some of them, but over time I began to realize that they had a value. I mean, I was really not anxious to use Red Fox's suit on other people, because I realized, I put it up for an exhibit once and I used it, and I thought, if it doesn't come back, I will really be upset about this, because it was Red Fox's suit. Some of them I didn't know, because it wasn't my show. It was clothes that people would call and give me clothes from the show, from Married with Children, when it finally ended, because they wanted them to be preserved. I tried to find information about them, and that was part of my interest when I finally found Brianna Livy to work on them with the Golden Closet, because that was her focus as well. Because nobody really thinks of television costumes as having an importance. Everybody seems to be, all the auction houses are focused on film costumes, but they don't see TV as important, and TV is like in our houses, in our lives. So it was really interesting, because Brianna and I have discovered that we both have sort of the same focus, which is the preservation of the clothes, the restoration of the clothes to how they were originally designed by the designer. What did the designer want them to be? And that is a basic focus. I respect the costume designer, and that they very specifically chose these clothes and made that line, cut that cuff, proportioned it for that actor. But these clothes were really important, and that they teach us something is part of what I'm looking for. And so Brianna's the only person I know who has that same focus. And the Golden Closet is trying to get people to be aware that these clothes have importance in our history and in our future. Part of the past and important to our future.